On April 10, 2016, Nostalria's, the largest private server for the World of Warcraft, was shut down by its operators. The event was a significant blip in the gaming world thanks to WoW having touched well over 100 million people in its lifetime so far. Within the WoW community though, a bucket of gas was kicked into an already fiery debate over legitimizing private servers, or for Blizzard to re-release the classic version of the World of Warcraft. Out of this came a rise in the number of fans making arguments as network engineers, copyright lawyers, international tradesmen, and game industry executives representing different sides. Whether they are who they say they are isn't important. But since then there's been a strong polarization between fans who support a legacy server and those who don't. At one extreme are those who've given a no confidence vote against Blizzard. At the other are those who believe Blizzard's decision is the only decision, and that the Nostalria's team should be jailed. So much passion! And for what? Hey, it's Soul, bringing to you the World of Warcraft. Today I want to talk about nostalgia, mostly within this conversation in WoW. It's the driving force in the argument for bringing back the old version of WoW, and there are a lot of observers in this argument who don't fully understand it. Partially because there are a lot of things pro-legacy players desire that contradict with each other, and partially because for some, the idea of a legacy server is so abhorrent that reason and understanding is impossible. This is just a single point in the argument for revisiting a classic version of WoW. This topic is not as black and white as anyone may think, including myself. Before I begin, I'll establish a foundation. I've played WoW for a long time without wavering and was given a statue as a thank you. I'm not saying that I know better than anyone, but just that I've been here through it all, for better or worse. There are many perspectives I can share and answer to. I'm skeptical of the success of a commercial legacy server for reasons that aren't within the scope of this video. That means I won't be talking about the business or technical pros and cons of operating an official legacy realm. Back to the topic at hand though, I am against the idea of a classic server for one indomitable reason, which you may already know if you've seen my other work. I can't be a Horde Paladin. According to Google, nostalgia is defined as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. I remember the feeling when I made my bald-headed undead warlock and he rose from the crypt for the first time. I remember the feeling of surprise as I got mauled by my first elite, a son of Aragal. I remember the excitement watching the first level 60 in my realm mow down a raid of level 40s in Arathi Highlands. Or the absolute horror when the honor system first kicked in and I logged into Terra Mill only to see a field of corpses, arcane explosions, and red fire. I remember so much more. But I don't share sentiments with those who want those feelings back. The past is important, it's the bedrock of our present, a foundation towards the future, and in some cases a sense of familiarity and comfort when the unfamiliar may not be to your liking. In the context of classic WoW nostalgia, it's a longing for a simpler time when the biggest worries of a player included waiting for 5 sunders or applying the wrong talent point. It's easy to sit and think back to the good old days when players were collectively confused and uninformed as opposed to the obsessions over sims and logs today. Here's an often used argument when calling for sentiment. They'd say, remember back then when we didn't know any better? We had to work together to solve problems and it felt like a real community. For a statement laced with such bittersweetness, there's a bit of truth, of value to it. It makes sense to me. It was kinda sorta neat when the answers weren't as available to us then as it is now thanks to data mining, Wowhead, and Google. The current WoW is cursed by its own success, burdened with the community of today that wants to know everything there is to know, not soon, not now, but yesterday. I can see where some people are coming from when they say some of these paradigm shifts and changes to the game and its player base aren't to their liking. Nostalgia though is not so easily satisfied. Some say that nostalgia's a hell of a drug. I don't agree with the metaphor though. I don't see it as a drug but simply as what it is, an emotional need to be satisfied. If I really missed that one movie that I raved about, I can find it somewhere and rewatch it. If I went to Disneyland as a child and had a great time, I can go back and try to relive the magic. There might be a special dish my parents cooked that really felt like home and I want to feel that again. Here's the conundrum with nostalgia, at least in the context of my opinion. You can't truly satisfy it. I might be more critical of my favorite movie with my more matured tastes. Disneyland might have totally changed since I was a kid, and at the least it would feel a lot smaller. That special meal just might not taste as good as the fleeting memories associated with it. Part of the magic that came with our first experiences in WoW was literally that, our first experiences. It was a new world to explore with a sense of danger that came mostly with not quite knowing what was going to happen next. This is where part of my skepticism lies. Can so many players flip a switch and just unknow? I can't. In big ways, I still remember the solo leveling routes I took, the ideal farming spots, to ignore dungeons and to chain fear the Alliance into mobs. I've done my time there for 2 years with no other version of WoW to compare it to at the time, and it was a relief when I could finally move on. That's nostalgic for me too, the feeling of walking forward towards something fresh, maybe better, maybe worse, but I know that my expectations for my story and game to move on will be fulfilled. Nostalgia isn't a craving to be satisfied, it's impossible to replicate past experiences. We're different people from who we were before, but for others there's an allure to it because we can sort of get there halfway. How would the me of today deal with the WoW of yesterday? I couldn't. That gameplay doesn't jive with me anymore, so I can't be appealed to with something like nostalgia. That's precisely why Classic Realm is not for me. It's very, very simple. I am not the target audience. So for me to not prefer that doesn't mean the entire premise of wanting to relive the experience is invalid. I don't like or agree with it, so it sucks, or it doesn't matter. It's paraphrased obviously, but it's an argument often used. It's a silly one. Players are allowed to have preferences without antagonizing each other. I can't be offended that Blizzard is doing something I don't like because I know that someone else will like it. Without having played on a private server, I know it's not for me. Not everyone can come to that conclusion so easily, and of those, some are curious. That is the target audience. The cry for Classic Realms is, outside of this topic of nostalgia, a protest against today's standards of gaming and a reach for the old, hardcore-leaning playstyle of the past. Another still includes players who've never played earlier iterations of WoW, the Wrath babies, or the Kata babies, or the whatever babies. The legacy movement piques curiosity to be retold in old stories, or obscure videos, or discovered on private servers. And among the fans on these servers fiddling away at talent points hoping their group fills, a fierce segment of this otherwise happy community is fueled by a circular reasoning, a vitriol against the company that they may have once loved. Devoted players of private servers are in their own bubble, a microcosm of the greater community, a space for players who love and enjoy this kind of WoW, this sort of gameplay, and the relative safety that their experience is immune to the advancements in the game they don't like. And with that reassurance, they're happy. And instead of a nostalgia being quite fulfilled, instead they find, in so few words, a happy space. So why is that there's a continuing argument by two sides that claim to represent the majority of players? If legacy players are happy with their experiences in a private server, why take the time to spam Twitch streams? And why are other fans so defensive that they'd rather alienate fellow fans and polarize an already fragmented community? Personally, I think that some people do see this topic as black and white, right and wrong. It's more than that. It's philosophical, it's emotionally driven, it's human. It could be because these players who obey their thirst for nostalgia still aren't satisfied. A private server is what it is, a reverse-engineered thing. It's unofficial, standing on the gray side of law and litigation, a shadow of the current game and an echo of the game it's trying to recreate. These fans may prefer an official classic server, and if and when that happens, and when it's filled to the brim with veterans and mop babies and WOD babies and Legion babies coming in with complaints from every direction, will that satisfy them? When the add-on creators and wowheads and YouTubers bring the already demystified game into the light, will that satisfy fans? Or will it just be one more mole whacked, only to have two more appear? I don't know. I really don't know. Share your thoughts and stay breezy.